You're not invisible to women because you're too nice. You're hiding behind a mask of kindness. Picture this scene that plays out in coffee shops across America every single day. A man opens every door, pays for every meal, agrees with every opinion she voices, yet walks home alone while the supposedly arrogant guy in the corner gets her number. In the next 50 minutes, you'll understand the exact psychological mechanism that makes this happen. And more importantly, you'll get a practical protocol you can implement within the next 24 hours to change everything. If you've ever felt like you're doing absolutely everything right in dating, but still being treated like emotional furniture, this revelation isn't about changing your fundamental character. It's about finally revealing it. Here's what I desperately wish someone had told me years earlier, during that painful coffee shop moment, when you let her cut in line, bought her drink without being asked, complimented her outfit twice, and received a polite "thank you" before watching her walk directly toward the guy who barely looked up from his book. You walked away thinking you weren't enough, weren't attractive enough, weren't successful enough. The devastating truth: you were too much of what wasn't authentically you. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who mapped the hidden territories of the human psyche, said something that should terrify every people-pleaser. The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is. That mask of endless agreeability you've been wearing, it's not genuine kindness, it's fear dressed up in a costume of virtue. The real question we need to explore together is this: what's actually happening in that invisible psychological space between you and authentic human connection? The good boy protocol has been systematically destroying your magnetic field since childhood, and you didn't even know you had one to lose. Think back to your earliest memories of receiving approval from the adults who shaped your worldview. Every single time you showed genuine anger, expressed real disappointment, or voiced actual disagreement, someone older and supposedly wiser corrected you with phrases that still echo in your subconscious. Good boys don't get upset. Good boys share everything. Good boys always put others first. This cultural programming didn't transform you into a genuinely kind person. It trained you into someone who avoids conflict at any cost. And women, whether they consciously realize it or not, interpret chronic conflict avoidance as profound emotional unavailability. Here's the shadow work truth that will fundamentally shift your understanding of attraction. Your reflexive niceness isn't actually virtue in action. It's a sophisticated defense mechanism designed to protect you from the terror of rejection. And this defense system has roots that go all the way back to your earliest childhood wounds. You unconsciously learned that love came with conditions attached, so you became a conditional person, constantly calculating the social mathematics of approval. If I do X perfectly, she'll definitely approve of me. If I carefully avoid Y, she won't have any reason to leave. This exhausting mental process has turned you into someone who lives in permanent audition mode instead of authentic expression mode. Consider the fundamental difference between a wolf and a golden retriever in terms of how they move through the world. The golden retriever is universally beloved, completely safe, entirely predictable, and sleeps alone every single night. The wolf commands respect, remains fundamentally unpredictable, carries an element of danger, and draws intense attention wherever it goes. I'm not suggesting you need to become literally dangerous to other people. What I'm suggesting is that you need to stop being so damn predictable that you fade into the emotional background of every interaction. Women don't fall in love with niceness, they fall in love with presence, and genuine presence requires the full integration of all parts of yourself, including especially the parts you've been systematically trained to hide from the world. Your entire dating strategy up until this moment has actually been elaborate self-sabotage disguised as virtue, And the trigger moment that changes everything arrives when you finally realize this truth. Every single time you've said whatever you want to do, instead of expressing your actual preference, you disappeared a little more from her awareness. Every time you automatically agreed just to avoid the possibility of friction, you chose invisibility over intimacy. And invisibility is the opposite of attraction. You are currently living through an exhausting psychological civil war between who you pretend to be in public and who you actually are in the privacy of your own mind. And this internal conflict is systematically killing your natural attractiveness while destroying your mental health. On the surface level, that everyone can observe you present as eternally agreeable, endlessly accommodating, and constantly available for whatever anyone else might need from you. You smile when you're frustrated, say yes when you mean no, and apologize for things that aren't your fault and never were your responsibility. But underneath this carefully constructed facade, you're carrying a tremendous burden of repressed emotions that have nowhere to go. The shadow side of your personality, the part Jung identified as containing all the aspects of yourself you've learned to disown, is seething with accumulated anger at being consistently overlooked despite your best efforts. There's secret resentment building toward the people you're always accommodating, who never reciprocate your consideration. There's hidden frustration at perpetually being relegated to the friend category by women who then pursue men who treat them with significantly less obvious care. There's buried rage at a world that seems to reward selfishness while punishing generosity. And perhaps most painfully, there's deep shame about having these unspiritual feelings in the first place. This fundamental split between your outer persona and your inner reality creates what I call the desperation leak, the subtle energetic neediness that women can detect from incredible distances, like sharks sensing blood in the water. When you systematically repress your authentic emotional reactions to preserve everyone else's comfort, you become emotionally starved, and this starvation creates a hungry quality in all your interactions. You're not seeking connection, you're seeking the validation you've been denying yourself. And validation-seeking behavior is profoundly unattractive because it signals that you don't know your own worth, independent of others' opinions. The tragic irony that most men never recognize is that their desperate attempts to become more attractive through constant agreeability actually make them profoundly repulsive because they eliminate the very psychological tension that creates romantic chemistry. When you agree with everything she says, you're not showing interest, you're showing absence. When you're available for every plan she suggests, you're not demonstrating commitment. You're demonstrating that you have nothing else meaningful going on in your life. When you never express preferences that might create negotiation, you're not being considerate. You're being psychologically invisible. Let me tell you about two men I've observed closely over the past several years. We'll call them Alex and Mike, because they perfectly represent the difference between shadow denial and shadow integration in real-world dating scenarios. Both are intelligent professionals in their early 30s. Both are financially stable. Both are physically attractive. Both are currently single. But their approaches to dating reveal everything about why one consistently struggles, while the other succeeds seemingly without effort. Alex embodies what most dating advice tells men to do. He says yes to absolutely everything. A woman suggests, responds to text messages within minutes, regardless of what else he's doing. Plans elaborate, expensive dates designed to impress. Never expresses disagreement with any opinion she shares, and analyzes every single interaction afterward, looking for microscopic mistakes he might have made. He reads dating books, follows relationship coaches on social media, and approaches each new connection like a complex puzzle to be solved through the correct application of techniques. Alex is what most people would call a really good guy, and he genuinely cannot understand why he consistently gets friend-zoned by women who then pursue men who seem to put in significantly less effort. Mike operates from a completely different paradigm. he takes several days to respond to messages because he has a rich life that doesn't revolve around romantic validation, has strong opinions about restaurants, and actually expresses them during the planning process, will literally leave a date early if he's genuinely not enjoying the conversation, disagrees respectfully but firmly when his views differ from hers, and makes decisions based on his own authentic preferences rather than calculated strategies. Mike doesn't read dating advice, doesn't analyze his interactions, and approaches each new connection with curiosity about whether they're compatible, rather than anxiety about whether he's performing correctly. Can you guess which one has trouble getting second dates, and which one often has multiple women competing for his attention? Alex represents what Jung would call shadow denial, the absolute refusal to acknowledge or express the parts of himself that have personal wants, that make demands on others, that might occasionally disappoint people or create temporary discomfort. His entire identity has been built around being the person who never causes problems, who always makes things easier for everyone else, who eliminates friction wherever he goes. But in eliminating friction, he has also eliminated the possibility of genuine intimacy, because intimacy requires the meeting of two separate individuals, not the absorption of one person into another's preferences. Mike represents shadow integration, the mature acceptance that he contains multitudes as a human being, including the capacity to be naturally unavailable when he's focused on other priorities, authentically disagreeable when his opinions differ from others, and appropriately inconvenient when honoring his own needs. Mike hasn't become selfish or cruel. He's simply stopped denying the parts of himself that exist independently of others' approval. This integration makes him simultaneously more attractive and more peaceful because he's not constantly monitoring his behavior for signs that he might be disappointing someone. Carl Jung wrote something that should be carved into every people-pleaser's bathroom mirror. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your psychological darkness isn't cruelty, malice, or destructive impulses. It's simply the natural human capacity to prioritize your own legitimate needs, to disappoint others when necessary. For your integrity to exist as a completely separate person with completely separate desires, who chooses to share time with others rather than desperately needing their approval to feel okay about yourself. The shadow you've been desperately avoiding your entire adult life isn't actually dangerous or destructive. It's the part of you that naturally has healthy boundaries, that comfortably says no to unreasonable requests that might hurt someone's feelings in service of radical honesty about what you want and need. When you systematically repress these natural human capacities in service of being spiritual or evolved, you don't become more virtuous. You become half a person trying to navigate a full world, and half a person simply cannot create the kind of complete attraction that leads to genuine romantic partnership. The psychological truth that changes everything is this: women are not magnetically drawn to men who have successfully eliminated their shadow through spiritual bypassing or people-pleasing strategies. They are powerfully attracted to men who have learned to integrate their shadow in healthy, conscious ways. They want to be with someone who can be simultaneously loving and appropriately selfish, genuinely kind, and naturally unavailable when necessary, generously giving and firmly boundaried when the situation calls for it. This integration of opposing qualities is what Jung called the transcendent function, the mature psychological ability to hold contradictory truths simultaneously without collapsing into confusion or rigidity. The fundamental principle that will completely transform your understanding of attraction and revolutionize your approach to dating is this seemingly counterintuitive truth. Authentic romantic attraction is created through strategic subtraction, not desperate addition. Every text message you don't send creates exponentially more intrigue and interest than 10 messages you do send. Every time you resist the compulsive urge to be immediately and constantly available, you create the essential psychological space where genuine desire can actually grow and develop naturally. Here's the life-changing psychological truth that most men never discover. Attraction grows and thrives in emotional space and productive tension, not in constant availability and endless accommodation. When you're always immediately responsive, always automatically agreeable, always infinitely accommodating to her changing moods and requests, you systematically eliminate the very dynamic tension that creates romantic interest in the first place. Romantic polarity. The magnetic pull between two people requires actual psychological pulls, meaning you cannot be magnetically attractive if you're constantly moving toward her energy, instead of maintaining the integrity of your own authentic position in the relationship. This isn't about playing games or manipulating emotions. It's about understanding the fundamental psychology of desire. Desire requires distance. Want requires the possibility of not having. Interest requires uncertainty about outcome. When you make yourself completely predictable, totally available, and entirely accommodating, you eliminate mystery challenge and the delicious uncertainty that keeps romantic interest alive. You become psychologically invisible, not because there's something wrong with you, but because you've removed yourself from the equation entirely. I call these crucial moments polarity points, specific instances where your genuine, authentic response creates productive tension rather than false harmony, where your real personality emerges instead of your people-pleasing persona taking over. When she suggests a restaurant that you honestly dislike, do you automatically say, "Sounds perfect"? Or do you respectfully say, "I'd actually prefer somewhere else"? How about we find something we'd both enjoy? When she tests your boundaries through chronic lateness, last-minute cancellations, or treating your time as less valuable than hers, do you say "no problem at all"? Or, "That doesn't work for me, let's find a better time"? Most men think they're being incredibly considerate, mature, and relationship-ready with the first response in each scenario. In psychological reality, they're being fundamentally cowardly, and women detect this cowardice immediately because they've been socialized their entire lives to read emotional subtlety and authentic confidence. What reads as consideration to you reads as weakness to her. What feels like maturity to you feels like the absence of masculine presence to her. What seems like relationship skills to you seems like the inability to exist as a separate person to her. Every single time you avoid natural tension in service of artificial harmony, you simultaneously avoid the possibility of genuine intimacy between two autonomous individuals. Disagreement that's handled with authentic respect and emotional intelligence creates real connection between two people who exist independently of each other. Fake agreement kills attraction because it eliminates all evidence that you exist as a separate human being with separate preferences, separate boundaries, and separate needs, who's choosing to spend time with her rather than desperately trying to earn her approval through perfect compliance. Here's a detailed, real-world example that illustrates this principle. With perfect clarity, Sarah suggests watching a romantic comedy for your third date together. She mentions that she's been wanting to see this particular film for weeks and really hopes you'll enjoy it too. The golden retriever response, the one you've been programmed to give, sounds like this. That sounds absolutely perfect. I love romantic comedies, and I'm sure anything you want to watch will be great. I just want to spend time with you. The integrated response, the one that creates actual attraction, sounds like this. I was honestly hoping for something with a bit more action or suspense, but I'm curious about what draws you to this one. Maybe we can find a thriller with romantic elements, or we could compromise with an action comedy that has both elements we'd enjoy. The first response makes you completely disappear from the interaction. There's no negotiation, no evidence of separate preferences, no indication that you exist as an autonomous person with your own tastes and desires. You've essentially said, "I have no independent existence, just tell me what to like." The second response reveals actual personality, creates natural negotiation space that allows both people to participate in the decision, and demonstrates that you exist as a separate human being with separate preferences, who's genuinely interested in finding something you can both enjoy rather than automatically deferring to her wishes. Jung's archetypal framework explains this dynamic with remarkable clarity and precision. The lover archetype cannot exist in healthy psychological balance without the warrior archetype as its foundation. Genuine deep passion, the kind that creates lasting relationships, requires boundaries and inner strength as its essential foundation. When you attempt to embody only the lover energy, constantly giving, endlessly accommodating, perpetually nurturing you, create a dangerous energetic imbalance that women instinctively recognize and unconsciously avoid because it signals psychological incompleteness. Women need to sense both archetypal energies operating in a potential partner, the capacity for profound feeling and emotional depth. The lover combined with the inner strength to protect and appropriately channel that feeling. The warrior. A man who can love deeply but cannot set boundaries becomes overwhelming and eventually exhausting to be around. A man who has strong boundaries but cannot access deep feeling becomes cold and emotionally unavailable. The integration of both archetypes creates what women find irresistibly attractive, someone who can love fully while maintaining his own psychological center. This revelation isn't about becoming cruel, selfish, manipulative, or emotionally unavailable in your interactions with women. It's about finally becoming psychologically complete and authentic. Your shadow contains your natural power, your healthy boundaries, your capacity to disappoint others when necessary, and your ability to exist as a separate individual who chooses connection rather than desperately needing it. When you learn to integrate and express these qualities, instead of systematically repressing them, you stop auditioning desperately for love and start expressing love from a place of genuine wholeness and abundance. The life-changing revelation that transforms everything is this: women are not attracted to men who desperately need their approval to feel okay about themselves. They are magnetically drawn to men who genuinely want their company and enjoy their presence, but don't require their constant validation to maintain basic psychological stability and self-worth. This subtle but crucial distinction changes absolutely everything about how you approach dating relationships and your own personal development. The fundamental shift that changes everything about your relationship with attraction is learning to stop performing your life for others' approval and finally start living it authentically for your own fulfillment. This monumental transition from performance mode to authentic living requires a complete philosophical reframe of your approach to dating and relationships. You are not auditioning desperately for her love, like an actor trying to land a role in someone else's movie. You are sharing your genuine life experience and honestly evaluating whether it creates natural compatibility with hers. This single shift in perspective and intention will transform your entire approach to dating, texting, conversation, relationship building, and ultimately your own self-worth. The first crucial realization is that most of your dating anxiety comes not from fear of rejection itself, but from fear of being rejected for who you actually are, rather than for the performance you've been giving. When you're constantly calculating what to say, how to act, and when to respond, rejection feels devastating because it means your strategy failed. But when you're expressing your authentic self, rejection becomes simple incompatibility not a judgment of your worth as a person, but evidence that this particular person isn't aligned with who you genuinely are. This distinction eliminates most dating anxiety because it removes the pressure to be perfect and replaces it with the much simpler goal of being genuine. Here's your first practical exercise that you can implement immediately. To begin this transformation message, only what genuinely interests you, amuses you, or feels authentic to share, and absolutely nothing else. Before you send any text message to a woman you're interested in, pause and ask yourself this crucial question with complete honesty. Am I sending this because I genuinely want to share something that matters to me, or because I think it's what she wants to hear from me and will increase my chances of getting a positive response? If your honest answer is the latter, delete the message completely and wait until you have something authentic to communicate. This simple filter will immediately make your communication more attractive and dramatically less needy, because it ensures that every message comes from genuine expression rather than calculated strategy. Women can sense the difference between authentic sharing and strategic manipulation even in text messages, because authentic communication has a different energy signature. When you share something that genuinely interests you, your enthusiasm comes through naturally. When you craft messages designed to get specific responses, your neediness comes through instead. Your second practical exercise is systematically learning to practice respectful disagreement in progressively higher stakes situations. Start with completely safe scenarios when anyone in your life, friends, family members, co-workers, casual acquaintances, expresses an opinion that you genuinely disagree with. Practice saying something like, "I actually see that quite differently," and then share your authentic perspective without apologizing for having different thoughts or trying to soften your position to avoid any possibility of conflict. Begin with completely low-risk situations: coffee preferences, movie ratings, weekend activity, suggestions, restaurant choices. Build your psychological capacity for authentic expression gradually, so that when it matters most in romantic situations, you have developed the emotional muscle memory to be genuine rather than automatically deferring to avoid conflict. The goal isn't to become argumentative or contrarian. It's to develop comfort with the reality that two people can have different perspectives and still maintain connection and respect for each other. The shadow work perspective on this entire process is absolutely crucial to understand and integrate. You must learn to embrace rejection as a mirror that reflects your psychological fears back to you, not as proof of your fundamental inadequacy as a person worthy of love. When someone rejects your authentic self, your genuine preferences, your real opinions, your actual personality, your natural way of being, they are not making a statement about your objective worth as a human being. They are simply selecting themselves out of your life based on incompatibility, which is actually extraordinarily good news for both of you. Think about it this way: you genuinely want to be rejected by people who don't appreciate your authentic personality, because romantic compatibility cannot be manufactured through performance manipulation or strategic behavior modification. If someone can only be interested in you when you're pretending to be someone else, then they're not actually interested in you at all. They're interested in your performance, and maintaining a performance indefinitely is exhausting and ultimately impossible. The mask always slips eventually, and when it does, the relationship built on false pretenses collapses. Carl Jung wrote something that captures the absolute heart of this psychological transformation. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This terror of complete self-acceptance, including acceptance of the parts of yourself that might disappoint others or create temporary discomfort, is exactly what keeps you trapped in exhausting performance mode instead of peaceful, authentic living. But here's the beautiful paradox that changes everything once you understand it. women are powerfully drawn to authenticity rather than strategies, techniques, or manipulative tactics. And authenticity can only emerge when you fully integrate your shadow, when you finally accept that you contain the natural human capacity to be occasionally disagreeable, appropriately unavailable, and necessarily disappointing to others when that serves your genuine self-expression and personal integrity. The turning point in your entire relationship with attraction, dating, and ultimately yourself arrives when you finally realize this fundamental truth that changes everything. You don't attract the right women for you by becoming someone else entirely through self-improvement strategies. You attract them by becoming completely and unapologetically whole as the person you actually are. This requires developing the psychological courage to show up as your complete self in every interaction, including especially the parts of your personality that might not be universally appealing to every single person you meet. Stop asking the wrong question that keeps you trapped in performance mode. What do women want from me, and how can I become that? Start asking the right question that leads to authentic connection. What do I genuinely want in my life and in relationships, and how do I express those desires with complete honesty and integrity? The women who are genuinely compatible with your authentic self will be naturally attracted to your genuine desires and real self-expression. The women who aren't compatible will select themselves out of consideration before you waste months or years trying to force incompatible puzzle pieces together. Both outcomes serve your highest good and save you tremendous amounts of time, energy, and emotional pain. The men who never seem to struggle with attraction, who have multiple high-quality women interested in them without apparent effort, all share one fundamental quality that has absolutely nothing to do with their physical appearance, financial resources, or social status. They don't desperately need validation from romantic partners because they receive genuine fulfillment, meaning, and identity from their own rich internal lives and external pursuits. This isn't about becoming isolated, emotionally unavailable, or narcissistically self-absorbed. It's about becoming so authentically engaged with your own growth, interests, passions, and life purpose that romantic connection becomes a beautiful addition to an already fulfilling existence rather than a desperate necessity to fill an inner psychological void. Understanding this principle intellectually is different from living it practically. Most men who hear this advice immediately start trying to fake self-sufficiency as another strategy to attract women, which completely misses the point and usually makes them even more transparently needy. The path to genuine inner fulfillment that creates natural magnetism cannot be faked or performed. It must be authentically developed through consistent engagement with activities, relationships, and pursuits that genuinely matter to you, regardless of their impact on your attractiveness to women. The practical foundation of developing this inner magnetism begins with systematically cultivating interests and passions that genuinely fascinate you completely, regardless of whether women find them attractive, cool, or socially impressive. Whether your authentic interests lie in woodworking, ancient philosophy, rock climbing, chess mastery, gourmet, cooking, music, production, creative writing, martial arts, astronomy, or any other domain, passionate engagement with something meaningful is inherently attractive to others because passion itself is a form of aliveness that draws people naturally. When you talk about something you genuinely love, something that lights you up from the inside, your entire energy shifts dramatically. Your voice changes, your posture straightens, your eyes become more animated, and you become fully present in the moment, rather than anxiously monitoring the other person's reaction to what you are saying. This natural aliveness, this authentic engagement with life is what people find magnetic, not your desperate attempts to say the right thing or be the right person to earn their approval. The second crucial element is building deep, authentic friendships with other men who share your interests, values, or life philosophy. Men who only socialize with women while constantly seeking romantic connection, or who have no close male friends because they see other men primarily as competition, are living in a state of dangerous energetic imbalance that women can detect immediately. You desperately need spaces in your life where you can be completely yourself, without any romantic subtext whatsoever, where you can express your authentic thoughts and feelings, without worrying about whether they make you more or less attractive to potential partners. Male friendship serves psychological functions that romantic relationships simply cannot provide. With close male friends, you learn how to exist without performance, how to be valued for exactly who you are rather than what you can provide or how well you can please others. Male friendship teaches you how to navigate conflict without it meaning the end of the relationship, how to maintain your own position while respecting someone else's, how to give and receive support without it being transactional. These psychological skills are absolutely essential for healthy romantic relationships, but they cannot be learned within romantic contexts because the stakes feel too high and the fear of loss creates too much performance anxiety. The third essential component is committing seriously to some form of psychological, spiritual, or personal development work, whether through therapy, meditation, practice, journaling, shadow work, philosophical study, or any other authentic path that increases your self-knowledge and emotional intelligence. This commitment transforms you into the kind of person who knows himself deeply, who can articulate his values clearly, who understands his own psychological patterns and triggers, and who takes responsibility for his own emotional state, rather than depending on others to regulate his mood and self-worth. Self-knowledge creates the unshakable foundation for genuine, authentic expression in all your relationships. When you know who you are at your core, your values, your boundaries, your non-negotiables, your natural preferences, your authentic desires, you stop needing others to tell you who you should be to earn their love. This inner stability is incredibly attractive because it signals that you are psychologically complete enough to choose connection from abundance rather than seeking it from desperation. In Carl Jung's archetypal framework, when you learn to embody your own inner king energy, true sovereignty over your internal psychological world, you naturally stop needing women to function as emotional band-aids for your unhealed psychological wounds, or as external sources of the validation you should be providing for yourself. The king archetype represents mature inner authority, clear self-direction, the ability to make decisions based on your own values rather than others' opinions, and the developed capacity to create order, meaning, and purpose from the raw chaos of existence in your own life first, before trying to fix or save anyone else. When you operate primarily from this integrated archetypal energy, attraction becomes a natural byproduct of your authentic self-expression, rather than a desperate pursuit that dominates your thoughts, consumes your energy, and determines your mood. Women can sense when a man is psychologically complete versus when he's seeking them to fill roles that he should be filling for himself: therapist, entertainment, committee, validation, dispenser, life purpose, provider, emotional regulatory system. The inner return means returning to yourself as the primary source of your own validation, entertainment, meaning, and emotional stability. From this psychologically grounded place, dating becomes an opportunity to share your natural abundance with someone who genuinely appreciates it, rather than a desperate attempt to extract validation, purpose, or emotional regulation from someone else to fill the emptiness inside you. This fundamental shift in orientation changes absolutely everything about how you show up in romantic situations, how you handle rejection, how you interpret other people's behavior, and how you make decisions about who deserves access to your time and energy. The time for hiding behind the comfortable mask of your people-pleasing persona is over. Find the courage to face your shadow directly and choose to become psychologically whole. The path forward requires brutal honesty about who you've been pretending to be and radical commitment to discovering who you actually are underneath all the performance and conditioning. Let me paint two detailed pictures that illustrate the profound difference between unconscious, reactive living and consciously integrated authenticity, because seeing this contrast clearly will help you understand exactly what transformation looks like in practical daily life. The typical man approaches dating and relationships like this. He automatically says, "I'm completely fine with anything you want to do," when asked about dinner plans, movie choices, or weekend activities, even when he has clear preferences that would create a more enjoyable experience for both people. He responds to text messages immediately, regardless of what important activities he's engaged in, or whether he has anything meaningful to communicate, because he's afraid that delayed responses will be interpreted as disinterest. He agrees enthusiastically with her political opinions, spiritual beliefs, and lifestyle preferences, despite holding genuinely different views that could create interesting discussions. He apologizes constantly for things that aren't his fault and never were his responsibility, treating "I'm sorry" as a general-purpose conflict avoidance tool rather than a specific acknowledgement of actual wrongdoing. This same man plans elaborate, expensive gestures, trying to prove his feelings through material demonstration instead of expressing them naturally through presence and authentic attention. He gets friend-zoned regularly by women he's genuinely interested in because he never creates the productive tension that sparks romantic chemistry. He spends countless hours analyzing every interaction afterward, looking for microscopic mistakes he might have made, and strategizing how to avoid similar errors in future encounters. He reads dating advice, obsessively follows relationship coaches on social media, and approaches each new potential connection like a complex puzzle to be solved through the correct application of techniques, rather than as an opportunity for authentic human connection between two unique individuals. The integrated man lives his life completely differently. He has genuine preferences about restaurants, activities, and experiences, and he expresses them kindly but clearly during the planning process, creating space for negotiation and mutual consideration rather than automatic deference. He takes natural time to respond to text messages because he's actively engaged with his own rich, fulfilling life that exists independently of romantic validation. He respectfully but firmly disagrees when his authentic opinions differ from others, viewing differences of perspective as opportunities for interesting conversation rather than threats to connection. This integrated man apologizes when genuinely appropriate, when he's actually caused harm or made a legitimate mistake, but not as his default response to any minor conflict or discomfort. He shows authentic affection through genuine presence and real emotional expression, rather than elaborate, performative gestures designed to impress. He gets consistently respected for his honesty, consistency, and emotional authenticity by both men and women in his life. He knows exactly who he is, likes that person, and feels no compulsion to apologize for his authentic self or modify his personality to gain others' approval. The crucial difference between these two men isn't fundamental personality type, natural temperament, or genetic predisposition. It's the degree of psychological integration they've achieved. The integrated man has done the difficult inner work of accepting all parts of himself, including especially the parts that might occasionally disappoint others, create temporary conflict, or require other people to adjust their expectations. He has learned to hold the productive tension between seemingly opposing truths, He can be simultaneously loving and appropriately selfish, genuinely kind and naturally unavailable when necessary, generously giving and firmly boundaried when the situation calls for clear limits. Your daily practice moving forward is elegantly simple in concept, but requires consistent commitment. Care less about outcomes and other people's reactions. Care infinitely more about authentic self-expression and personal integrity. Before every significant interaction, whether it's responding to a text message, making plans, expressing an opinion, or navigating conflict, ask yourself this crucial question with complete honesty. Am I about to respond from fear of rejection and the need for approval, or from genuine self-expression and authentic communication? Choose genuine expression every single time, even when it feels significantly scarier in the moment, even when you can't predict or control the outcome. Carl Jung's psychological framework reveals the profound truth that most men never discover facing rejection directly and consciously is shadow integration in practical daily action. Every single time you express your genuine preferences, and someone responds negatively every time you set a healthy boundary, and someone protests every time you disagree respectfully, and someone becomes upset, you are actively practicing the integration of your capacity to disappoint others when necessary. This consistent practice gradually builds the psychological muscle of authentic self-expression that becomes stronger and more natural with regular use. The emotional journey of this transformation moves through predictable developmental stages that you should understand, so you can navigate them consciously from the initial pain of recognizing how invisible you've become, through people-pleasing, through the intellectual insight of understanding the psychological mechanisms involved, into the practical resolution of implementing new behaviors despite initial discomfort, culminating in the personal empowerment that comes from authentic self-expression, and finally, arriving at the deep peace of knowing who you are regardless of others' reactions or approval. The initial pain of feeling invisible despite your best efforts transforms into the liberation of genuine self-expression, which naturally develops into the inner authority that comes from knowing your own worth, independent of external validation. This progression isn't always linear. You'll have setbacks, moments of doubt, and situations where you revert to old patterns. But the overall trajectory moves toward greater authenticity, self-respect, and genuine confidence that attracts healthy relationships naturally. You don't attract the right women for you by becoming someone else entirely through self-improvement strategies or personality modification programs. You attract them by becoming completely and unapologetically whole as the unique individual you were born to be before conditioning taught you to hide your authentic self. This wholeness necessarily includes your capacity for both kindness and appropriate selfishness, both availability and healthy boundaries, both agreement when you genuinely agree, and willingness to disagree when that serves truth and authenticity. The awakening is remarkably simple in concept. Stop performing love as a strategy to get love and start living love as an expression of who you are. Stop auditioning desperately for others' approval and start expressing your genuine self with confidence and integrity. Stop hiding from your shadow, your capacity to disappoint, to be unavailable, to have needs and preferences, and start integrating it consciously into your whole personality. The women who are truly meant for you will be naturally drawn to your authenticity, like plants turning toward sunlight. The women who aren't compatible with your genuine self will select themselves out of consideration, saving everyone involved from the pain of trying to force incompatible pieces together.